I walked into the upscale boutique with my worn wallet and basic debit card, and the store manager immediately looked down on me. She mocked my simple payment method and called security to escort me out. Little did she know, I was the daughter of one of the wealthiest tech moguls in Silicon Valley. What happened next turned that entire shopping center upside down. If you've ever been embarrassed by someone judging your financial status, this story will leave you speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Stay with me until the very end to witness how one simple phone call completely destroyed someone's career and changed everything forever. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable true stories that will restore your faith in justice. My name is Elena, and what I'm about to share with you happened just 8 months ago in Beverly Hills, and it still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. Sometimes, life has a way of teaching us the most profound lessons when we least expect them. Sometimes, the people who judge us the harshest are the ones who need to learn the biggest lessons about humility, respect, and the danger of making assumptions based on appearances. This particular Tuesday afternoon started like any other ordinary day, but it ended up becoming one of the most extraordinary experiences of my entire life. I had been working remotely from my small apartment for the past 2 years, building my own digital marketing consultancy from the ground up. Working from home meant I rarely needed fancy clothes or expensive accessories. My wardrobe consisted mainly of comfortable jeans, simple sweaters, and practical shoes. I preferred investing my money into my business rather than designer handbags or luxury items that served no real purpose in my daily life. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from my college roommate Jessica, who was getting married in 3 days. Her maid of honor had fallen ill with food poisoning, and she desperately needed someone to step in and help coordinate the final wedding preparations. The ceremony was going to be held at an exclusive country club in Beverly Hills, and she needed me to pick up some last-minute items from Pristine Boutique, one of the most prestigious shopping destinations in the area. Jessica had already paid for everything over the phone, but the items needed to be collected in person with proper identification. She assured me that all I had to do was show up, present my ID, and collect the packages. It seemed simple enough, and I was happy to help my dear friend during her moment of need. After all, that's what friendship is all about, being there for each other when it matters most. I threw on my favorite pair of faded blue jeans, a comfortable gray sweater that I'd owned for years, and my trusty canvas sneakers. I grabbed my small crossbody bag, the same one I'd been using since my sophomore year of college, and headed out to Beverly Hills. The contrast between my modest Honda Civic and the luxury cars lining the streets was immediately apparent, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Pristine Boutique was everything I'd expected and more. The storefront was elegant and sophisticated, with floor-to-ceiling windows displaying the latest designer fashions on perfectly posed mannequins. The entrance was marked by polished brass fixtures and a doorman who looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. As I approached the entrance, I noticed other shoppers entering and leaving. Women dressed in designer clothing, carrying expensive handbags, and wearing jewelry that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I'd entered a different world entirely. The interior was breathtakingly beautiful, with marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with the most exquisite clothing I'd ever seen. Soft classical music played in the background, and the air was filled with the subtle scent of expensive perfume. Everything about the place screamed luxury and exclusivity. I could immediately sense that I stood out like a sore thumb among the other customers. Women in perfectly tailored suits and designer dresses glided between the clothing racks with an air of confidence and belonging that I clearly lacked. Their conversations were peppered with mentions of vacation homes, charity galas, and exclusive events that existed in a world far removed from my own reality. As I made my way toward the customer service counter, I couldn't help but notice the stares I was receiving from both customers and staff members. Their expressions ranged from mild curiosity to outright disdain, and I heard whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked past. The discomfort was palpable, but I reminded myself that I had every right to be there and a legitimate reason for my visit. The customer service area was located at the back of the store, behind an elegant marble counter that matched the floor. 2 women stood behind the counter, both impeccably dressed in black blazers with the store's logo embroidered in gold thread. Their hair was styled to perfection, and their makeup looked like it had been professionally applied. The nameplate of the woman closest to me read Victoria Sterling, store manager. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria appeared to be in her early 40s, with platinum blonde hair pulled back in an elaborate chignon and wearing what looked like a very expensive designer suit. When she looked up at me, her welcoming smile immediately transformed into something cold and dismissive. Her eyes traveled from my sneakers to my jeans to my simple sweater, and I could practically see her making judgments with each passing second. "May I help you?" she asked, though her tone suggested that helping me was the absolute last thing she wanted to do. There was an unmistakable condescension in her voice that made it clear she'd already decided I didn't belong in her upscale establishment. The way she emphasized the word help made it sound more like an accusation than an offer of assistance. "Yes, hello," I replied, trying to maintain a friendly and professional tone despite the obvious hostility. "I'm here to pick up some items that were ordered for the Henderson-Morrison wedding. Everything has already been paid for, and I just need to collect the packages." I reached into my bag to retrieve the confirmation email that Jessica had forwarded to me, along with my identification. Victoria exchanged a meaningful look with her colleague, and I saw her eyebrows arch in what appeared to be skeptical amusement. The other woman, whose nameplate identified her as Bethany, leaned closer to whisper something in Victoria's ear. Both women then looked at me with expressions that made my stomach turn with embarrassment and growing frustration. "The Henderson-Morrison wedding?" Victoria repeated slowly, as if the very words were foreign to her. "You're telling me that you're here to collect items for one of the most exclusive social events of the season?" The disbelief in her voice was unmistakable, and she made no effort to hide her skepticism from the other customers who were beginning to take notice of our conversation. "Yes, that's correct," I confirmed, extending the printed email confirmation toward her. "If you could just verify this information in your system, I'm sure we can get this sorted out quickly." I was still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, hoping that once she saw the official documentation, her attitude would improve and we could complete the transaction professionally. Victoria glanced at the paper I was holding, but made no move to take it from my hand. Instead, she let out a small laugh that was clearly meant to be heard by everyone within earshot. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some form of payment verification before we can proceed with any transaction. We have very strict policies about releasing merchandise to unauthorized individuals." The request caught me completely off guard. Jessica had already paid for everything over the phone using her credit card, and according to the confirmation email, all I needed to do was present identification and collect the items. There shouldn't have been any need for additional payment verification, and Victoria's request felt more like a deliberate attempt to create obstacles than a legitimate business requirement. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand," I said, feeling my cheeks begin to flush with embarrassment. "The items have already been paid for in full. I'm just here to pick them up." On behalf of the bride, I have the confirmation email right here, along with my identification, which should be all that's required according to your store's policy. Quote, That's when Victoria's expression shifted from dismissive to openly hostile. She straightened up to her full height and crossed her arms over her chest in a gesture that was clearly meant to intimidate. "Ma'am, let me be perfectly clear about something. This is one of the most exclusive boutiques in Beverly Hills. Our typical customers don't look like you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face burning with shame and anger as I realized what was happening. She wasn't questioning my identification or the legitimacy of my pickup request. She was judging me based solely on my appearance, my clothes, and her preconceived notions about what kind of person belonged in her store. "I understand that you might not be familiar with our usual clientele," Victoria continued, her voice growing louder and more condescending with each word. "But we simply cannot release expensive merchandise to individuals who cannot provide proper financial credentials. For all we know, you could be attempting to perpetrate some kind of fraud or theft." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I could feel every eye in the store turning toward us, and the classical music seemed to fade into the background as customers and staff members alike focused their attention on the drama unfolding at the customer service counter. The humiliation was overwhelming, but I forced myself to remain calm and composed. "I'm not trying to commit fraud," I said quietly, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. "I'm simply trying to help a friend by picking up items that have already been purchased and paid for. If you would just look at your computer system, I'm sure you can verify that the Henderson Morrison order exists and that I'm authorized to collect it." Victoria let out another condescending laugh. "Oh, I'm sure you have all sorts of explanations and stories prepared. But let me ask you this. What kind of payment method are you planning to use if additional charges arise? Do you even have a credit card, or are we talking about some kind of prepaid debit situation?" The question felt like another deliberate insult, designed to humiliate me in front of the growing audience of onlookers. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my simple bank debit card. Nothing fancy, just a basic card from a major national bank with my name printed in plain letters across the bottom. When Victoria saw the card, her expression shifted from condescending to openly mocking. "Oh my goodness, Bethany, look at this. She's trying to shop at pristine boutique with a basic debit card from a chain bank. Can you imagine?" She held up my card as if it were some kind of amusing artifact, waving it in the air for everyone to see. The humiliation was becoming unbearable. I could hear whispers and stifled laughter from other customers, and I felt tears beginning to well up in my eyes. But I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these people who had already decided that I was somehow less worthy of respect and dignity than they were. "There's nothing wrong with my payment method," I said, my voice barely above a whisper but filled with quiet determination. "And there's nothing wrong with me being here. I have every right to collect those items, and your behavior is completely unprofessional and discriminatory." Victoria's face flushed with anger at being challenged. "Discriminatory? How dare you? I'm protecting this store and our legitimate customers from potential fraud and theft. Looking at you, it's obvious that you don't belong in an establishment like this. Your clothes, your attitude, your cheap little debit card, everything about you screams that you're in way over your head." The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, and I could see people taking out their phones to record the confrontation. Some appeared to be enjoying the spectacle, while others looked uncomfortable, but made no move to intervene. The situation was spiraling completely out of control, and I knew I had to do something to defend myself before it got even worse. That's when I heard heavy footsteps approaching from behind, and a deep, authoritative voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Is there some kind of problem here that requires my attention?" I turned to see a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit walking toward us with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being in charge. His nameplate identified him as Robert Ashworth, general manager, and everything about his demeanor suggested that he was someone who wielded considerable power and influence within the store hierarchy. Victoria's entire attitude changed the moment she saw him approaching, transforming from aggressive hostility to obsequious deference in the span of a few seconds. "Mr. Ashworth, thank goodness you're here," Victoria said, relief evident in her voice. "We have a situation with this individual who's attempting to collect merchandise without proper authorization or adequate payment methods. I was just explaining our store policies regarding security and fraud prevention when she became argumentative and accused us of discrimination." Robert looked me up and down with the same critical eye that Victoria had used, taking in my casual clothing and modest appearance with obvious disapproval. When his gaze finally met mine, there was something cold and calculating in his expression that made my skin crawl with discomfort and growing apprehension. "I see," he said slowly, nodding as if Victoria had confirmed his worst suspicions about me. "And what exactly is the nature of this alleged pickup request? What kind of merchandise are we talking about? And what evidence has been provided to support this claim?" His tone was formal and professional, but there was an underlying current of skepticism that made it clear he had already sided with his employee. I took a deep breath and tried to explain the situation once again, speaking clearly and calmly despite the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. "I'm here on behalf of Jessica Henderson, who is getting married this weekend. She called ahead and purchased several items over the phone, and I'm here to collect them with proper identification and confirmation documentation." Robert examined the email confirmation I handed him, but his expression remained skeptical throughout the entire process. "This could easily be fabricated," he said dismissively, handing the paper back to me without making any effort to verify the information in their computer system. Anyone with basic computer skills could create a document like this. The accusation felt like another slap in the face. I was being treated like a criminal simply because I didn't meet their arbitrary standards of what a legitimate customer should look like. The injustice of the situation was overwhelming, but I forced myself to maintain my composure and continue fighting for the respect and fair treatment I deserved. "If you would just check your system, you would see that the order is legitimate and that I'm authorized to collect it," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "This is discrimination, pure and simple, and I won't stand for it any longer. You're treating me this way because of how I look, not because of any legitimate business concern." That's when Robert's expression hardened into something truly ugly. "Miss, let me be perfectly frank with you. This is an exclusive establishment that caters to a very specific clientele. Our customers expect a certain level of security and discretion, and frankly, you don't inspire confidence in either regard. Looking at your appearance and your basic financial instruments, it's clear that you're not familiar with this level of retail experience." The words stung more than I could have ever imagined. Standing there in front of dozens of witnesses, being publicly humiliated and accused of fraud simply because I didn't look wealthy enough for their liking. I felt a rage building inside me that I had never experienced before. But alongside that anger was a crystal-clear determination to prove just how wrong they were about everything. "Mr. Ashworth," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me, "I think you're making a very serious mistake right now. A mistake that's going to cost you far more than you could ever imagine." I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. The name that would change everything. Robert let out a harsh laugh that echoed through the marble-walled boutique. "Are you threatening us now? Are you actually trying to intimidate the management of this establishment?" He turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers who had gathered to witness the spectacle. "Ladies and gentlemen, we now have someone attempting to threaten our staff because we won't facilitate what appears to be a fraudulent transaction." Victoria nodded vigorously in agreement, clearly emboldened by her manager's support. "She's been hostile and argumentative from the moment she walked in here. Honestly, I think we should call security and have her removed from the premises before this situation escalates any further. We have legitimate customers who deserve to shop in peace without having to witness these kinds of disruptions." I ignored their comments and hit the call button on my phone. The number I was calling belonged to someone who had been the most important person in my life for as long as I could remember. Someone who had taught me about integrity, hard work, and the importance of treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their background or appearance. The phone rang once, twice, and then I heard the familiar voice that had comforted me through every challenge and celebrated every victory throughout my entire life. "Elena, sweetheart, what's wrong? You sound upset." Even through the phone, I could hear the immediate concern in my father's voice, the protective instinct that had always made me feel safe and loved. "Dad, I'm at Pristine Boutique in Beverly Hills, and I need your help," I said, making sure my voice carried clearly through the store's acoustics. "The manager and staff here are refusing to let me collect items for Jessica's wedding. They've accused me of attempted fraud and are treating me like a criminal because of how I'm dressed." Robert was still smirking confidently, probably assuming I was calling some friend or family member to come pick me up after my supposed scheme had been exposed. He had absolutely no idea what was about to happen to his career, his store, and his entire understanding of power dynamics in the retail world. "Pristine Boutique?" My father's voice immediately shifted from concern to sharp and focused, taking on the tone I recognized from his business calls. "What exactly is happening there, Elena? Give me details about who's involved and what they've said to you." I could hear him typing rapidly on his computer in the background, and I knew he was already taking action. The store manager, Robert Ashworth, and his employee, Victoria Sterling, have publicly humiliated me in front of dozens of customers. They've accused me of fraud, mocked my payment method, and told me I don't belong here because of my appearance. They refuse to check their system to verify the legitimate order I'm here to collect. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and when my father spoke again, his voice was ice-cold, with barely contained fury. "Robert Ashworth? Yes, I see his employment record here. He's been with the company for 12 years, but that's about to change very quickly. Put him on the phone, Elena. Right now." "I don't think he wants to talk to you, Dad," I said loudly enough for Robert to hear clearly. "He seems to think he knows everything about everyone who walks into this store, and he's made it very clear that people like me aren't welcome here." Robert's confident smirk faltered slightly, but he was still far from understanding the magnitude of his mistake. Who does she think she's calling? He asked Victoria, though his voice had lost some of its earlier arrogance. Some kind of lawyer or social media influencer who's going to make a big scene about this? That's when every phone in the store started ringing simultaneously. The sound was deafening and urgent, cutting through the tension in the boutique like an alarm bell announcing the end of the world. Robert's phone, Victoria's phone, the assistant manager's phone, even the phones at the individual department counters. They were all ringing at once, with calls from different levels of corporate headquarters. Robert looked at his phone screen and I watched his face transform from confident superiority to confusion, then to something approaching panic. The call was coming from the executive offices of the parent company that owned the entire chain of luxury boutiques, and the number flashing on his screen was one that he had probably never seen before, but definitely recognized as belonging to someone with the power to end careers with a single conversation. "Ashworth speaking," he answered, his voice already showing signs of nervousness. "Yes, sir." "What?" "No, there must be some kind of misunderstanding. Yes, she's here right now. But I don't understand what this has to do with. Sir, if you could just explain to me what's happening." I watched with fascination as Robert's face cycled through a series of expressions that told the entire story of his realization. Confusion gave way to disbelief. Disbelief transformed into horror, and horror settled into the kind of absolute terror that comes from understanding that you've just made a career-ending mistake of epic proportions. "Yes, sir. I understand completely. Right away, sir. We'll take care of this immediately." He hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, staring at it as if it might somehow undo the conversation that had just taken place. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The dawning recognition that everything he thought he knew about this situation was completely wrong. But the phone calls weren't finished. Victoria's phone was still ringing, then the assistant managers throughout the store, then the department supervisors. Within minutes, it seemed like every employee in the boutique was receiving urgent calls from different executives within the corporate structure. The panic was spreading through the staff like wildfire, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces that something monumentally significant was happening. Victoria answered her phone with trembling hands, and I could hear her voice cracking as she tried to respond to whatever she was being told. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." "No, we didn't realize." "Yes, she's still here. We'll do whatever is necessary to resolve this situation." The transformation in the atmosphere of the store was dramatic and immediate. Where moments before I had been treated like an unwelcome intruder, now I was suddenly the center of respectful attention from every employee in sight. The other customers were watching with a mixture of curiosity and growing awareness that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Robert approached me slowly, like someone walking toward a dangerous animal that might attack at any moment. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice completely different now, respectful, nervous, and filled with the kind of deference that comes from suddenly understanding exactly how much power the person in front of you actually wields. "There seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding here today. A catastrophic failure in our customer service protocols that I can assure you will be addressed immediately and thoroughly." The formal language couldn't hide the panic in his voice, and I could see sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Oh, I don't think there's been any misunderstanding at all," I replied calmly, my voice steady and clear. "I think everything has been perfectly clear from the moment I walked in here. You judged me based on my appearance, accused me of fraud without any evidence, and publicly humiliated me in front of your customers. The only question now is what consequences you're going to face for that behavior." Before Robert could respond, the main entrance doors opened and my father walked in. At 68 years old, David Thompson was still an imposing figure, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect wherever he went. He was wearing one of his perfectly tailored charcoal suits, and his expression carried the controlled fury of someone who had built a business empire by never tolerating disrespect toward the people he loved. The entire boutique seemed to hold its breath as he walked across the marble floor. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence, and I could see customers and employees alike trying to figure out who he was and why his arrival had created such a dramatic shift in the store's atmosphere. Some of them clearly recognized him from business magazines or financial news programs. He walked straight to me and placed a protective arm around my shoulders, his presence immediately making me feel safe and supported in a way that I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice gentle when he spoke to me, though his eyes remained fixed on Robert with an intensity that could have melted steel. "I'm fine now, Dad," I replied, and I meant it completely. Having him there beside me made me feel like I could handle anything that came next. These people have shown me exactly who they are, and now it's time for them to face the consequences of their choices. My father looked around the boutique, taking in the crowd of onlookers, the panicked expressions on the faces of the staff members, and the luxury merchandise that surrounded us on every side. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades building and running successful businesses. "I want to understand exactly what happened here today," he said, his tone measured but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel underneath. "I want to know how my daughter was treated in one of my stores, and I want to know what steps are going to be taken to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. His face went completely white, then green, and for a moment I thought he might actually collapse right there on the marble floor. The realization that he had spent the last hour humiliating and insulting the daughter of the man who owned the entire luxury retail chain was clearly more than his mind could process. Your daughter?" Victoria stammered, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Thompson, we had no idea." "If we had known who she was." She trailed off, apparently realizing that what she was about to say would only make the situation worse. My father held up a hand to stop her. "That's exactly the problem right there. You didn't treat my daughter poorly because you didn't know who she was. You treated her poorly because of how she was dressed, because of your assumptions about her financial status, and because of your prejudices about who deserves respect and dignity in your store." The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in the boutique was hanging on every word, understanding that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. The lesson being delivered wasn't just about customer service or business policies. It was about fundamental human decency and the danger of judging others based on superficial characteristics. "The fact that she happens to be my daughter is completely irrelevant," my father continued, his voice growing stronger and more passionate with each word. "Every person who walks into this store deserves to be treated with respect and courtesy, regardless of how they're dressed, what kind of car they drive, or what type of credit card they carry. That's not just good business practice, it's basic human decency." Robert finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Mr. Thompson, sir, I cannot begin to express how sorry I am. This was a complete failure of judgment on my part, and I take full responsibility for everything that happened here today. If there's anything I can do to make this right—" "Actually, there is something you can do," my father replied, his tone becoming businesslike and decisive. "You can clear out your office and turn in your security badge. Your employment with this company is terminated effective immediately, along with any other staff members who participated in this disgraceful display of prejudice and discrimination." The words fell like a judgment from on high. Robert's career in luxury retail was over, finished by his own actions and the choices he had made based on nothing more than his superficial impressions and prejudiced assumptions. Victoria looked like she was about to faint, clearly understanding that her own job was equally doomed. "Security will escort you from the premises," my father continued. "Your personal belongings will be packed and sent to you, and you can expect to receive a comprehensive review of today's events in your permanent employment record. I hope this experience teaches you something about the importance of treating every human being with dignity and respect." As if summoned by his words, 2 security guards appeared and approached Robert and Victoria. The same customers who had been enjoying the spectacle of my humiliation were now watching in stunned silence as the tables turned completely. Some were taking pictures and videos, clearly understanding that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Before security escorted him away, Robert turned back to me one final time. "Miss Thompson, I am truly, deeply sorry for everything that happened here today. You were right, and I was completely wrong. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, and I hope I can learn from this experience and become a better person because of it." I looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the arrogant, prejudiced manager who had humiliated me, but a human being who was facing the consequences of his choices and genuinely seemed to understand the magnitude of his mistakes. "I hope you do learn from this," I said finally. "I hope next time you'll remember that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of how they look or where they come from." Robert nodded gratefully and walked away with security, his head hanging low but his expression suggesting that he truly understood the lesson he had been taught. Victoria followed a few moments later, looking equally devastated but also seemingly aware that her behavior had been inexcusable. As the immediate drama concluded, my father turned his attention to the remaining staff members and the crowd of customers who had witnessed everything. I want everyone here to understand that what happened today was completely unacceptable and contrary to every value that this company stands for. We will be implementing immediate and comprehensive changes to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. The new store manager, who had been summoned from another location, arrived within 30 minutes and personally apologized for the treatment I had received. The items for Jessica's wedding were located immediately and presented to me with the kind of respectful service that should have been provided from the very beginning. But more importantly, my father announced that the entire luxury retail chain would be implementing new training programs focused on customer service, respect, and the elimination of prejudice and discrimination in all their stores. The incident would become a case study used in business schools and corporate training programs across the country. As we prepared to leave the boutique, my father put his arm around me once again. "I'm proud of how you handled yourself today," he said quietly. "You stood up for yourself with dignity and grace, even when you were being treated terribly. That takes real strength and character." "Thank you for coming, Dad," I replied, "and thank you for teaching me that every person deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of who they are or what they have. That lesson means more to me than any business empire ever could." The story of what happened to Pristine Boutique spread quickly through social media and business circles. Videos of the confrontation and its resolution went viral, sparking conversations about prejudice, assumption, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. Some people criticized the harsh consequences faced by Robert and Victoria, while others argued that their behavior warranted exactly the response they received. The boutique chain implemented sweeping changes to their hiring practices, training programs, and customer service protocols. The incident became a powerful reminder that in our interconnected world, treating someone poorly based on their appearance can have consequences that extend far beyond a single interaction. 6 months later, I still think about that day often. Not because of the vindication or the justice that was served, but because of the deeper lessons it taught me about human nature, prejudice, and the importance of always trying to see the person behind the appearance. It reminded me that everyone has a story, everyone deserves respect, and everyone has the potential to surprise you if you're willing to look beyond the surface. I continued to dress casually and use my simple debit card, but now I did so with a different kind of confidence. The confidence that comes from knowing that your worth as a human being isn't determined by external things like clothing or credit cards, but by how you treat others and how you choose to live your life. The most important outcome wasn't the career consequences faced by Robert and Victoria, or even the policy changes implemented by the company. It was the reminder that every interaction we have with another person is an opportunity to choose kindness over judgment, respect over prejudice, and understanding over assumption. Never judge someone by their appearance or their financial status. You never know who they really are, where they come from, or what their story might be. But more importantly, it shouldn't matter. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, not because of what they might be worth or who they might know, but simply because they're human. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.